Alrighty, folks. So last night I went and I saw The Batman. My review of that is coming up in just one moment. This video is sponsored by Ring. So last night I went and saw The Batman. Went and saw it with my wife. It is 1 million hours long. And it's one of those movies where I started off and I was like, okay. And then I got a little further in. I was like, all right. And then I got to the end. I was like, meh. And then the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. And so you're about to hear a lot of hot takes on The Batman because I hate this movie. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to tell you right up front, spoilers. Spoilers aplenty here. So if you haven't seen the film yet and you want to see the film and you don't want to be spoiled, I'm warning you. You've been warned. All right, this is Detective Batman. So if the original Michael Keaton Batman was sort of crime-fighting Batman and the Christopher Nolan Batman was city-saving Batman, this Batman is supposed to be Detective Batman. And this has a long history in the Batman comics. Some of the best Batman comics, particularly my favorite, The Long Halloween, is rooted in the idea of Batman not just as caped crusader, but as a great detective, smarter than everybody else, capable of picking up on clues, investigating and tracking down crimes. I'm going to start with what's right with the film because it's going to be real short. So what's right with the film is that it looks great. It is a film noirish take on Gotham City. It almost feels kind of like retro Taxi Driver Gotham City. So everything is very dirty. It's all taking place at night. It's shot in kind of grayscale at times. It's got a lot of warm oranges and reds, but against a very dark black. So it's a lot of muttered dialogue. It feels as though it's taking place in the same city as Joker is taking place. So if you saw Joker, Todd Phillips' Joker, which looks like 1970s New York, it feels almost like the other half of that, but it seems more like the take on what future New York would look like if you were living in New York in 1970. That's sort of a good way of putting it. The music to the film is okay. I think that Michael Giacchino tends to be a little bit derivative in how he does the scores to the films. This one, he basically takes the music that Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard wrote for Batman Begins in the Nolan trilogy, which the theme goes da-da, and here he just inverts it. So instead of da-da, it's da-da. Okay, fine. So it's a little bit derivative, but the score is totally fine. The acting is okay, as we'll find out in a second. They give Robert Pattinson nothing to do as Batman. Nothing to do as Batman. I didn't think that Zoe Kravitz had any sort of chemistry with Robert Pattinson. So she's fine. She's kind of flirty. Meh. I didn't see anything particularly wrong with her performance. I just didn't see a lot right with her performance. You have John Turturro showing up as Carmine Falcone, and he is John Turturro, so he's okay. He's somewhat menacing. The best performance in the film is Colin Farrell playing the Penguin. You literally cannot spot Colin Farrell in this makeup. There is no way that you can see Colin Farrell here. The whole movie, I'm staring at him going, that's not Colin. It is Colin Farrell. It's the best performance in the movie. Paul Dano gives a good performance in the film, although he's sort of playing the Joker a little bit, although he's playing it more wide-eyed, as Paul Dano is apt to do. The main character of the film is the Riddler. And herein lies the main problem with the film. The biggest problem with the film is that the film hates Batman. Like the actual Batman character hates the Batman character. And this drives me up an absolute wall. The biggest problem with the film is not the wokeness. Yes, there's some woke touches. You have Catwoman, who is a woman of color, who is, of course, good, and you have the black female mayor who is good, and you have the black Jim Gordon who is good. Every white character is apparently bad, like all of them. Fine, whatever. I don't really care about that. That's fine. You have Catwoman say stuff about white privileged elites, and she makes a suggestion that Bruce Wayne as a child, when his parents were killed, he doesn't really have a right to be super upset about that because, of course, he was very, very rich. That doesn't, kind of rings hollow. Now, a lot of these lines seem like throwaways for film lefty Twitter, but the main theme is not a throwaway. The main theme is what matters here. The film despises Batman. So every Batman iteration has to explain why a man who is a billionaire would dress up like a bat and go around beating up criminals. It's not answered. And the director doesn't know. And the writer doesn't know. And this is the problem. So in the Nolan films, to take the contrast, the question as to why Batman does this is because if Batman does not actually intimidate the criminal underworld because the city is so corrupt, no one else will do it, and money isn't going to solve the problem. And so he needs to create a theatrical kind of fear in order to dissuade the criminal underworld from participating. And then, as it turns out, he also has to save the city itself and demonstrate his faith in the city by becoming a symbol. Here, you don't really know why Batman is doing what he's doing. It's never explained. He's very wealthy. He doesn't apparently do anything with his wealth. He doesn't try to give charity. He doesn't try, I mean, this is actually made a plot point. He's a bad man because he's white. He's a bad white man who doesn't actually give charity. He's not involved, and he's not playing that as a role. Again, this is part of the problem, is that Bruce Wayne and Batman are the same character. So I keep using the Nolan comparison because it is the gold standard for all superhero movies, not just Batman movies. So when you look at Nolan's Batman. Bruce Wayne is the character that Batman is playing. Okay, Bruce Wayne is not real. Batman is real. Batman is who Bruce Wayne really is. And so he has to play a fop. In Batman Begins, he's squiring around ladies in his Lamborghini, and he's buying hotels, and he's doing all of this just to cover up for the fact that he is Batman. So you get very separate Batman and Bruce Wayne. You get the same thing actually with Michael Keaton. Batman and Bruce Wayne are two different characters. Here, Batman and Bruce Wayne are the exact same character. There are points where Bruce Wayne is walking around. He's got the same dour expression, same glazed look, same kind of emo thing going on as Batman does the entire movie. And so there's no dichotomy. Alrighty, folks, well, I may not have loved the Batman, but here's the thing. Real Batman knows how to protect himself and protect his family, and you should too, because you need Ring Alarm. It's true. Ring makes an alarm. Ring Alarm is an award-winning home security system with available professional monitoring. It's more than just security. Ring Alarm can help protect your home from flooding, freeze, and fire as well. Ring Alarm works on any house or apartment. You can add sensors for motion, doors, and windows. Their professional monitoring gives you the ultimate peace of mind. All of their services are part of a Ring Protect subscription. There are no long-term commitments. If anything happens, professional monitoring will call you and can request emergency services. Best of all, Ring's professional monitoring is an amazing deal. You get so many great features, award-winning professional monitoring for less money than most professional alarm companies. You and your loved ones can rest easy, knowing that Ring Alarm is helping to protect your home. Get protection and peace of mind with Ring. You know, my family relies on Ring Alarm. I'm always concerned about security, and Ring Alarm makes me feel so much more secure. I know what's going on in my property at all times. You may not have known before, but it's true. Ring has that award-winning alarm. Go to ring.com/Ben Shapiro to get a great deal on a Ring Alarm home security kit today. That's ring.com/Ben Shapiro. So here's the actual plot of the film. Batman has only been Batman for a couple of years, so he's not really good at Batmaning yet. And he is tracking down criminals, and he gets drawn into a plot by the Riddler. The Riddler is giving clues so that Batman can track down all the way through the system of Gotham this citywide corruption that apparently is going to bring down the entire superstructure of faith in the city. Meanwhile, you have Catwoman, who's Selena Kyle, played by Zoe Kravitz. And Zoe Kravitz is similarly engaged in an attempt to commit a robbery against one of these underworld figures, but she's drawn into Batman's orbit by a murder that both of them are investigating at the same time, the murder of her roommate, maybe something more going on there. The Riddler is the main villain of the movie. You see the Penguin a fair bit. Carmine Falcone is one of the big characters in the movie. You get a little bit of Alfred. Of course, you get Jim Gordon, whose main job in this film is apparently just to say Jesus over and over again.
Christ, it's Coulson.
Whenever something bad happens, he just goes, Jesus. And that happens like 6 times. Like Jim Gordon does nothing except for basically stop Batman from getting arrested a lot. That's pretty much all he does. He's a bad detective. He doesn't do anything. The plot is that all these people get killed. Batman uncovers it. He realizes that his dad was corrupt also, or that his dad engaged in corruption with Carmine Falcone. Finally, we get to the end. Paul Dano does it's such a ripoff of Seven. He gives himself up. He doesn't get captured by Batman. Batman does not prevent a single one of these deaths. Batman, in fact, is complicit in one of the deaths by accident. And he doesn't actually capture the Riddler because he's clever. The Riddler gives himself up by sitting at a diner and getting arrested. Then he unleashes a bombing of Gotham that essentially causes the flooding of the city. And Batman goes to the Madison Square Garden, where a mayoral event is now being held for the brand new mayor, who is an uplifting black female who has no other story or backstory, so she's really uninteresting. It starts to flood. And up on top, in the wings, are a bunch of Paul Dano's followers, are a bunch of the Riddler's followers who are all dressed like the Riddler, and they are shooting down into the crowd to try and kill members of the elite in Gotham City. And so Batman goes up there and he's beating people up. There comes a point where he's beating this guy, and he's really, maybe beating him almost to death. And he stops, and they take off that guy's mask, and they say, "Who are you?" And the guy says, "I am vengeance." Okay, now this is the theme throughout the film. Ooh, the theme. Okay, so in order to explain why this is a problem, you have to now understand the character of the Riddler. So it says right at the beginning of the movie, "Who is Batman? I'm vengeance," right? He's just on the streets and he's beating people up.
I'm vengeance.
And then people keep calling him Mr. Vengeance for no apparent reason. Like, we don't know why they're calling him that, because he never actually publicly says he's vengeance. It's in his creepy diary, which again is supposed to be a mirror image of the fact that the Riddler also keeps a Zodiac Killer-style diary. So they're supposed to be two halves of the same whole. Batman is beating up this follower of the Riddler's. He takes off his mask, and the guy says, "I'm vengeance." And suddenly Batman sees. Suddenly Batman realizes he can't be vengeance. That's not what he's meant to do. He's betrayed his mission. And so he then descends on an electrified cable because he's trying to stop people from being electrocuted by this flying electrical wire. And he cuts off the cable. He's holding on to it. He falls down into the water, a rebaptism. He gets up, and then he proceeds to lead a bunch of people who are not really trapped, but kind of trapped, I suppose. And he leads them to, I guess, a safer place by carrying a torch. And then he goes up to the top of Madison Square Garden, and he is helping people be airlifted and evac'd out, medevac'd out. And this is how he has learned fulfillment. So what is this movie about? This movie is about how fighting criminality does not actually help innocent people. He says this at the very beginning. He says, I'm not sure I'm doing any good. I'm not sure I'm doing any good. By fighting the criminals, crime is still up. It turns out that Batman has to stop being Batman. Batman has been missing it the whole time. What Batman really has to be is Superman. Batman needs to go into areas like Madison Square Garden and not fight the criminals. He needs to go and lead people with a torch to a slightly safer area. He needs to help medevac people on the top of he needs to build Habitat for Humanity. He needs to join Jimmy Carter and build houses for homeless people. That's what Batman needs to be doing. This really is a sort of attack on the idea that fighting crime helps innocent people. It's an almost defund the police attitude toward what crime is. And it's an attack on the basic idea that individuals are capable of doing justice by finding bad guys and fighting them. Instead, apparently, individuals are only capable of doing nice things by helping little old ladies cross the street. It's this sort of mentality that has led to New York turning into Gotham City in the last couple of years, by the way. That's a fundamental betrayal of what Batman is. What makes Batman different from the Riddler and than any of these other criminals is these criminals target innocent people and Batman targets criminals. That's the basis of the character. The entire basis of the character is the cops are bad at targeting criminals because they're corrupt. Batman is good at targeting criminals because he's smart and because he's rich and because he's incorruptible. That's the entire basis of Batman. And they take all that and they flip it on its head because they don't like Batman. And this is why I have real problems with the movie. I kind of hate the movie. Like, the more I think about it, the more I get angry at it. Because they take the fundamental idea of what Batman is supposed to be, the protector of the innocent who targets the criminal, and they say that if he targets the criminal, this makes him no different than criminals. Because Paul Dano, who's the Riddler, is also targeting criminals. All the way up until the very end, when they have to just sort of add on this attack on Madison Square Garden and New York Broad Writ for no reason. He has no motivation for blowing up a bunch of trucks and flooding downtown. Like, none. He doesn't explain why he does it. He doesn't explain what the purpose of it is. All the way along, he's been saying, I'm exposing the true face of Gotham. Okay, that's a rationale. But what does that have to do with blowing up the city? They add that on just so that they can create a false distinction between Batman and the Riddler so that Batman can change his mission. So now Batman's mission is not beating up bad guys and stopping bad guys. Now Batman's mission is to be a firefighter. He's no longer a detective or a police officer. He's a firefighter. That's a betrayal, and it's a real problem. And that's my biggest issue with the film. It just feels like such a sellout. It feels like such a sellout of what Batman is supposed to be. Again, it's got a little bit of woke politics, but that's really not the problem. The problem is the broader woke orientation of the film. If the Nolan Batman was about the idea that you help innocent people by fighting criminality and provide an inspiration to people to fight criminality, if that's the idea of Batman, which it is, that's completely thrown on its head here. Matt Reeves, who's credited as both a director and a writer on the film, he does not like Batman, and I can't get over this. How do you give $150 million to a dude to make a movie about Batman when he clearly does not like Batman? When he thinks that Batman is bad, and that Batman has to be shown the error of his ways and learn to be a nicer human being. By the way, at the very end of the movie, Catwoman, who at no point has actually demonstrated any sort of moral bona fides. Like, I'm not sure she does a moral thing in the entire movie. At the very end, she says to him, why don't you run away with me? And we'll go rob some hedge fund CEOs. And he doesn't say back to her, that's bad to rob hedge fund CEOs. Instead, he thinks about it for a moment. She's like, no, you belong in Gotham. The generalized cheap left-wing sensibility is very silly with regard to Catwoman. If I have not made clear at this point, the movie's also 8 hours long. It's like a Wagnerian ring cycle, this film. It just goes on and on and on. Every shot is composed in order to have people walk across rooms. Like, Christopher Nolan would snap that cut right to the action. If you watch Dark Knight, there is no wasted motion in that film, and it's 2.5 hours long. This is 3 hours long, and it feels like 4. I never check my watch during movies, particularly not a Batman movie, and I check my watch at least twice during this film. It's better than Marvel, because everything's better than Marvel, because Marvel doesn't take characters seriously, and Marvel feels like cotton candy. This doesn't feel like cotton candy. It just feels like a fundamental betrayal of the character, which is just, it's lazy writing, and more than that, it's not nice to the audience. The audience wants to see Batman be Batman and be good at being Batman and know why he's being Batman. They don't want to see Batman learn the lesson that being Batman is bad. That defeats the purpose of going to a Batman film. Alrighty, so that is my review of The Batman. I know. A lot of people really like the movie because, hey, it's Batman. It's hard to dislike Batman. But folks, if you like this video, please like and subscribe and recommend some other movies that are coming up in the near future you'd like to see me review, or just leave a comment below and tell me how wrong I am, or maybe how right I am.
Take that, you friggin' psycho! I got you!